Hey everyone, nice to see you again. Third Thursday in a row. Doesn't it feel kind of crazy? It feels like I'm getting back into a bit of momentum here, having a third week in a row. I hope you are enjoying the knit along if you're working through the burn shawl. I know Clue 2 was a big one. There was a lot in Clue 2. I will admit that. So take your time with it. And it's probably going to take several weeks on this one. Even if you're a fast knitter, it's a much bigger clue. But I think it's nice to have a small clue one so you can kind of work your way into it a little bit slowly, get used to it, particularly if you haven't done cables before, you kind of get used to it. I see lots of you in here. Let me see. We have, hey Liz, nice to see you, and Melvia from New York. And we have Suds John. No, it's Sudeep Johnson from Cambridge in the UK. And Liz Zeigler, good morning from Missouri. You monopolized my time this morning. You didn't monopolize my time, Liz. It was a good question, and it got me taking my needles out to double check that I wasn't misremembering the edging, because sometimes I can go and say, no, no, this is definitely how it is, and there can be things that need to be tweaked. But I think it's written as it's supposed to be, fingers crossed. And I know that the testers went through it and they seem to do okay with it. But that's the funny thing about some of those edgings, lace edging. I find that if a yarn over happens at the start versus the end somewhere along the way, it suddenly throws the whole stitch pattern out. So it can feel that it's very easy to get a little one stitch out, which suddenly changes what you're doing. Hey, Elena from Charlesville. We've got Regina from Virginia, Gail from New York State, Karen from Tennessee, and another Karen from Chicago. And Elena, Clue 2 is kicking your butt. It's a long Clue 2. Take your time. Take your time. I know one a week is very hard because when I'm making the clues, each section doesn't fit neatly into the same amount of knitting time, but it fits together in terms of information or new things you do, but it doesn't always equal to knitting time. So it's almost impossible to get that right. There's always going to be a section with the shawl where there's just a lot more in one part than another. So just take your time with it. Marcy, you're enjoying watching the progress even though you haven't taken part. Well, the shawl is there for you when you see the end of it, if you do want to jump in at a later stage. Liz, you've got a few repeats done and you've no problems with the written instructions. Good, good, good. I'm glad to hear it. No, I think it was okay, but it is really easy with lace yarn overs, because of the fact that if you miss a yarn over at the start or at the end, it will mean, or if there's a stitch count off that you think you've got a different stitch count, it'll basically mean things get offset one. But the way I found when I got into a rhythm with it and I knew I had made a mistake is, once you've got that first row done, as you're coming back to it, when you go to do a knit two together, you put your needle into two stitches. You put them into the first part is going to be like a knit stitch or a solid stitch, and the next one is a yarn over. Whereas if you're trying to put them in and you're trying to get into the yarn over first, you'll know that it feels a little bit funny and there's something not quite right. So I use that as my guide as I was going through each row of my stitch pattern, because it happened all the time where I missed a stitch, or else maybe I knit three together, or I missed a yarn over. And so it meant that I knew where something wasn't right, and I was able to track back to be able to kind of to see what was happening. So I love having kind of safety checks in place so that if something funny is happening, you can find exactly where it went wrong and go back and kind of fix it from that point. Um, your next person here, I don't see your name. It's Schkik Knowles. I don't know how to pronounce your username. You're still in two, and you're on track to get it done in time, but you spent 3 days in hospital unable to knit. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you're back home, and I hope you are feeling better and that this will help with your recovery, that you've got something to work on. But yeah, no fun to spend time in hospital. Um, I'm looking down here. Suzanne. Okay, that's why the username I couldn't pronounce was Suzanne. And we've got someone from Italy as well. Hey, lovely to see you. I like how we're getting broader in our um when we're getting broader in what we're looking at. Melvia, when you come back, is the yarn over first, then the knit two together? Yes, so that when you go to work them, the first stitch you put the needle into is the knit two together. But what you'll see next on the needle is the yarn over and then the knit two together. And this is kind of a bird's eye lace because you've got yarn over knits two together on each row. It creates kind of this little zigzag, really open pattern. But because it's the same on every row, it effectively means that you've got how can I put it? It's rhythmic. It gets into a nice rhythm. So the only difference you're going to have is coming down to the very bottom point. So if you've got, I feel like I've kind of jumped ahead of myself with what we're talking about today because I'm answering questions. Nancy is here. Hi from Idaho. Loving shawl. They're almost ready for the edging. Excellent. So I have a couple of questions, but I'll give an overview of what we're doing with this one. So when we finished clue 2, we've started with clue 1 down here. Clue 2, we're growing up here with cables in the middle that are stepping out. And then at the very top, you decrease the cables, which makes them look like they've all folded in on each other. And then you just have a few rows of reverse stockinette stitch. So then what we're doing at the top is we've got a knitted on edging. It's quite narrow. So it's a 2x2 ribbing. And if you haven't done a knitted on edging before, you're just knitting sideways. And then at the end of every row, you're going to work the last stitch of the edging with the first stitch of the shawl. And you're just working across like that. And because the rows and stitches don't match up exactly, while you do it, normally it's an SSK, but at every few rows, you'll do an SSSK, so an extra one. And the reason for that is so that your edging doesn't get too long. So if your gauge is a little different or you feel that it's flaring out a bit, you can start working a little bit more decreases to kind of pull it in a small bit for you. This is somewhere else as well, where if you want a wider edging, you can just add multiples of 4, where you add more edging going on across the edge there. So that's the top part there is just so that you've got, I wanted it to feel finished, but I didn't feel like it worked well at the top there, because when you're wearing it and things like that, you don't really want a lace edge up at the top. So it's just something to add a little bit of decoration, plenty of stretch, and a bit more interesting than just a bind off or rows of garter stitch or something like that. So once you've done that knitted on edge across the top, then you're going to come down to that triangle there, the whole V, and you'll pick up stitches, the yarn over stitches that you've got down one side, one stitch in the tip for your tip down here, and then all the yarn overs up here. So you've got all of those stitches around picked up. And at that point, you're just going to start working this very simple lace. You'll begin with the wrong side row, and the one down in the middle and the tip is always going to be stockinette stitch. So you've got a marker on each side of that. On the wrong side, it's purl. On the right side, it's knit, and that one always stays the same. But then on right side rows, you'll also have yarn overs so that it grows out from the tip, because otherwise it's going to start pulling down, because as this grows out, you want a little bit more down here. So that's the only part that can add a little bit of confusion, is what happens with those stitches on each side and the bottom. But if you keep in mind that it should always feel the same and look the same when you're working your knit two togethers into the same stitches after your first wrong side row, it will mean that you'll spot if something's off, and you can make adjustments so that you move a little bit further or behind at the end. Up here, you were you were getting ready to start cable 5. You checked your stitch count to realize that you missed repeat cable 2 instructions, so you were 40 stitches short, and you realized why you needed a lifeline. Okay, so I see, because it was right down at the start that you had the repeat cable 2. You can also at this point you can do what I was talking about before, and you could just do another repeat of the other one up further, because it'll keep growing out. So you can also do, like, you're obviously not going to rip back down to the start, but I think adding another repeat up on the end is going to work really well also. So I think that just my inclination would be to keep going rather than going back down, because obviously it looked well to you. And whether you have a repeat of that first one or a repeat of the one up on the top, it's still going to look really well. So just keep going, work a few more repeats till you get up to the stitch, or you might opt to have a little narrower. So, but I personally wouldn't be ripping back down to the start, but that's just me. Um, And down here, I've got Anne. You love the top edging. You thought it was clever and neat. You haven't seen anything like it before. Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I've used it occasionally. Sometimes I tend to use it more for joining complete edges of work because I've done a shawl before called Cush Farraga, where it was a triangle going side to side, and then I left the live stitches, and then I started another triangle here. And as you started increasing the second one, you're joining the two together. So you had one going this way and one going this way. So one set of stripes here and one set of stripes here. So it's one that I've used there, and I've used a few other places because it's you're basically just knitting two sections together, and it works really well. And in fact, for the winter seasons in Tarsha, anyone who has done the bags for that, there was a little bag and you had small panels on each side. And then to join them, you picked up stitches and you did back and forth joining on each side. So the same kind of idea, but this one is almost easier because you put all your live stitches, so you're not picking stitches up as you go across. Melvia said, don't forget the yarn overs in the body. It helps when you pick up for the edging. Yes, it completely does. So like with the yarn overs, like the benefit of having yarn overs going down is that you're not trying to pick up loose stitches, and when it opens up, the yarn overs get stretched out, which actually really does you a favor with the shawl because it stretches and it opens it up. Now, if you have discovered that you've missed a yarn over somewhere along, it's fine. Just pick up an extra stitch somewhere along the way, or you can do a standard increase. Or what I've actually even done, because I think there was somebody, I think it was Karen, you were saying before cable 5, you were short a stitch and you were trying to figure out how to increase it. So for that, if you're short one stitch because you think you've missed a yarn over, what you can do one of two things. You can either, well, first of all, do your stitch counts, see which side it's on to make sure that you're adding it on the right side so that it stays balanced. So that's the first thing I do when I've realized that I'm a stitch short, is I figure out which side it's going to be on. Then you can either just do a make one in the reverse stockinette stitch along the edge where it's not going to be seen. Or what I've done occasionally, if I know it was one of the yarn overs, what I'll end up doing is I'll just do a yarn over on a right side row as well as the wrong side row. So I'll just put an extra yarn over in there as well. Either of those is going to work okay. And then just make sure when you pick up your stitches, if you're short a yarn over, if you went with the M1, just pick up another edge stitch further down. You can usually squeeze extra stitches in or pick up one stitch less on the other side, because with something like that, one stitch or two stitches different on each side doesn't really matter. What you want is you want an even number of stitches on each side. So whether it's 104, 106, 108, 114 on each side, doesn't matter once it's an even amount, and try to keep it the same on each side so that you've got it balanced. So that's the main thing, is that because the stitch pattern, our lace pattern, is multiples of 2, that's all you need to make sure of, is that you have a multiple of 2 on each side, your middle stitch down there, and the same on the other side. And outside that, you're just fine. Um, Looking down here, Kimberly, you say you love the knitted on edging. It's a relief from the super long rows. Yes, it absolutely is. It's like this little break in the middle of it. It's like you get the wider rows with lots of cables, and then all you're doing is these lovely little short ribbed rows, which are very relaxing. It does get bigger, unfortunately, with the edging, but there's not too much of the edging, and it's the same rhythm, so it's quite rhythmic. Now, if you want to maximize your yarn, and this is actually a question that came from Liz, that I think others might like to hear the answer to as well. The edging, I don't have it really, really wide, but that edging, you can keep going with it. So if you want to maximize your yarn and keep going with the edging, then you can just keep repeating the stitches for the rows for the edging. Then for the picot bind off, the picot bind off I've used is a slight variation on the picot bind off. It's, I suppose the best way of putting it is it's a small little bit more spaced out, so it's a slightly tighter picot bind off. There was a couple of the testers found that it was a little bit too tight. So if you are worried about it being too tight, you can, use a larger needle size can help loosen it up. or you can start moving those picots a little bit closer together. But generally speaking, for a picot bind off, I'd give at least 3 times the amount I use for one row. So if you find one row as you're working around the edge takes, say, 2 grams, I'd leave at least 6, maybe 8 grams to be able to ensure that I've got enough for the picot bind off around the edge. Because you're casting on stitches and taking them off, it's going to use a lot more than a standard bind off. Because normally a standard bind off, I'd leave about double the amount that I would have for a row to make sure I've got a comfortable amount. But with the picot one, it's going to take a little more, so I'd be inclined to stick with about 3 times as much to be sure that you don't run out. Jeanette, do you do the 12? You're doing the 12-row repeat, but you're confused where it says work cable 5 after 3 repeats. You're not where you were doing the 3 repeats. I'm not sure what I'm trying to do the 12. I'm wondering, Jeanette, if you missed with cable. I'm because you're talking about, I think you're talking about when you're working through section 1 of cable 4, you work all of the chart rows, and then I don't actually have all of the charts here with me. So you work all the chart rows, and then you work a certain number of cable 4 again. And at that point, you keep working with cable 4, but you're introducing cable 5 on the outside, which sets it up, which then allows you to work more repeats of cable 4. So I don't think I fully understand your question. It says work cable 5 after 3 repeats. I'm wondering, okay, I see what you're saying. I think because you've got, when you've got cable 4 in the middle, you've got 3 cables here, and then it's cable 5 when you work out. So instead of having 3 repeats of cable 4, you will now have 5 repeats of cable 4, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it fully because I'm kind of half understanding the question. Karen wants to know, where in the pattern do most people found they started the second ball of yarn if you're using Life in the Long Grass? You actually, Karen, you probably will be able to spot it as I'm doing it. I think it was as I was coming up to the tail end of my second repeat of the final chart before I started working the decreases, I think around there. So it was kind of towards the end of the main body of the shawl was when I started working it, I think. But I'm sure everybody's going to be slightly different. So please, anyone has any answers as to where they moved on to the second ball, pop it in there so Karen can see it. I don't know. Oh, it's a different Karen, I think. Another Karen was asking. She said she wanted her shawl wider but not longer. She didn't want to do the original suggestion of adding more increases you worked up because it changes the shape, and wondering if in clue 3 if there was a way of doing it. The cable part 3, there you kind of can do it. Will be a little bit of work because of course when you're doing the lace, it's all the way around, so there will be a little lace down the bottom here. But there's 2 things. First of all, blocking, because you can actually block it where you pull a lot more blocking widthwise, particularly with the lace, and are very gentle with the vertical blocking. So you can actually, because you can't pull this way and have it go fully in both directions. So if you maximize the width, that will also mean that it pulls up a little on the length. So that will help you. The only way you can use the lace on the edge and not do it would be kind of a little bit of short rows, where you had short rows creating little wedges at the top, so it was wider, and basically added a little extra and then do the rest of it as lace. But that is going to get a little bit more complex. But that would probably be, if I was going to do extra width at the top of the shawl and I wanted to do it in this section, it would be that way. Alternatively, you could possibly, even before you did the lace, you could even do a little reverse stockinette stitch wedge to make it a bit wider, and then begin the lace all the way around is another alternative. But really short rows at this point, I think, is going to be what you're looking for if you want width at the top, but you don't want all of the extra width at the bottom. Melvia, how wide will the lace edging be? Around 3 inches. I must have a look. Part of it, I'm not going to pull the shawl down here. I think it's looking at it, it's like 3 to 4 inches, but because of the way it's blocked, it tended to kind of shrink in a little bit post blocking. So it did look wider when it was being blocked, but it's kind of pulled up. So it's somewhere because I was kind of like, I said, okay, I want to take some photos. I'm done. I finished it this size and I quite like the size of it, but you could double the width of that and it's still not going to look excessive. It'll still look really well, I think. But as you're going through in terms of testing it, I'd actually, if you pin a small bit of it out and give it a spray with water or with steam, you can see how far it's going to go out. But just be aware, it's a very springy lace, so I do find that it springs back a little bit as you kind of go through it. See, have I got Monica, it's the repeat of the cable 4, then working cable 5. Yeah, I'm wondering where, and like I said, I don't have it written in front of me right now, so I might end up popping that back up into the forum. Somebody might actually jump out to me there and tell me how many rows was your cable 4 and cable 5. I think was it 24 and no, I think I'm getting it wrong. You're stopping it just short so that by the time you finish those other cable 4s, your cable 5 is finished as well. And those cable 5s will then move into being cable 4s when you work the next repeat. Kimberly said she switched to the second ball about 10 to 15 rows before the end of clue 2. Yeah, I think that's pretty close to what happened with me as well. Jeanette, your question got messed up, but it made sense with what I asked, and you think you understand. Excellent. Good, good. If it doesn't make sense, do put it up in the forum and just tag me, and I can pull the charts out and give you a more definitive answer if it's not making sense. But putting numbers out here when I don't have the charts in front is it's dangerous. I could end up confusing you more than helping. Liz, you've got 5 repeats done and it's 2 1/4, so 3 more to do. Perfect. Yeah, so I think that you kind of get a feel for how wide it is, but I think if I had more patience, I probably have done a much wider lace edging, because I think it could have, and part of it as well is it did spring back a little bit. So bear that in mind, that even it opens up quite far, it does spring back down quite a bit. So keep that in mind when you're doing it, if you want it to be fairly generous. If you have the yarn, you may as well keep going with it, I think. And make sure as well, like even if you've gotten as far as is written in the pattern, you want to keep going, pop up a photograph in the finished one, because you're effectively finished. You just happen to go and do, you just happen to go and do a little bit more, because it's going to be on the 18th of March. We'll be taking our grand prize, and the winner is going to be a €50 gift voucher for Stone Stitches that we'll just take as a raffle from there. And speaking of which, we will post it up, but Catherine is the winner of our Clue 2 raffle. So we'll tag her and we'll post it up in the forums as well. But I haven't seen any Catherine pop up here, so congratulations to you, Catherine. And what questions here? Shannon, did you do a contrast on the lace? Irina, you're joining late. Your gauge is a little tighter, so you plan to knit the border as wide as your yarn allows. You've got about 744 meters. Oh, fantastic, Irina. I think you'll be able to do a really wide border. Just keep going with it. And I was just saying that if you reserve about 3, like if you weigh your yarn to see how much a row of your edging does for you, then leave at least 3 times that for the actual bind off and the picot. But outside that, you can kind of keep going. And you can also, once you finish with the wrong side row, even if you finish on, it doesn't really matter what row of the stitch pattern. So just finish with the wrong side row, and then you can do your picot bind off on a right side row. Liz, you were saying, Barbara was saying, do I have any tips for what to pin this on for blocking, because it's so wide? I ended up using the foam mats. I use exercise mats, but you can get, other ones that are specifically for blocking, but just foam ones. I pinned it out, and then I just had 2 of them, because 2 or 3 of them wide, which worked pretty well, and 1 on the bottom. Along the top edge, I threaded a wire, the block wires, which works nice because you can keep it nice and straight. And then I've got a photograph in there. I think I put wires down the end, and then I also put pins out. But if you go into the video, you'll actually see a video of me blocking it, sitting on the, I think I've put it up on the top here. Normally I'm kneeling on the floor, but I lifted it up a bit higher to do it. But foam blocking mats work really well, I think, for blocking. So Elena, include 2, chart 4, which is 26 rows. On 4 repeat number 2, you're introducing cable 5 on the 13th row of the second repeat. Which is 26 rows. On 4 repeat number 2, you're introducing cable 5 on the 13th row of the second repeat. That is correct, which I think then you're doing it, and there's 14 rows in cable 5. So basically you work 12 rows, and then as you work the 14 rows of cable 5, when you finish cable 5, you'll then have also finished cable 4. So then you're able to have cable 4 for all, you'll have the original 3, and then the cable 5 will go into 4 here and here. So it ends up becoming 5 repeats of cable 4 for your section 2. So hopefully that should help. Thank you very much for the rows up there. That makes a big difference, because I was putting numbers together and my brain wasn't computing. And there was actually one more question from Sharon from the forums. She was asking about, she loved the idea, she loved the stitches and the idea of it for a baby blanket, and was wondering whether you could use it, a triangle shawl for a baby blanket. You absolutely could, particularly for a swaddling one. But you could also even, you could even take the pattern and work it across and do it diagonally and then decrease it down to create a square in a diagonal. So you could maybe make a square out of it. But I think it's totally okay to send a triangle for a baby blanket. Why not? Just make it a little bit bigger, and they can always fold the bottom part around the baby's toes. I think it would totally work. Be really nice as a baby, as a baby gift. Marcy was saying you got a whole load of play mats on eBay for around £15. Yeah, exactly. Play mats are perfect, because what I end up doing for that is, because I like the big ones, the 24 inches by 24 inches, just local sports shops or general stores, whenever they've got a sale, usually in January is a good time, because everyone is selling exercise equipment. So these big stacks of foam mats that you can use for exercise areas, or for our baby mats, but like either exercise babies, it's all the same. And you can stick pins in them, and they're waterproof, and you can change the shape of them. They're really good. Susie, you're halfway through 2, and you're looking forward to finishing as you're a slower knitter. I'll tell you what, if you're already halfway through cable chart clue 2, you're doing really well. I'm not a very fast knitter. I usually have got a couple of things on the go. So I am in awe of all of you knitters and how fast you speed through these shawls. So there is no shame in taking your time with the knitting. Just enjoy it. And everyone definitely works along at their own pace. That was actually a really interesting suggestion. Someone was suggesting making it with a larger size yarn. That would actually be lovely for a baby blanket. You could see do the same stitch pattern, but just actually make it a little bit bigger for if you did it in a larger yarn, it's going to be a much more generously sized baby yarn. I love that idea. Elaine, you can do a duplicate shawl and Kitchener them together, a square for a baby blanket. That was actually one of the things Sharon was saying. She said, maybe do 2 of them. And yeah, you could actually do the same thing. So I'm kind of thinking, if you have one triangle up, like, you'd have to do the drawings out and just kind of see how you'd fit them together and what ones would go together. You could even, Kitchener them, or even you could just leave an actual sewn seam or a 3-needle bind off between them as well. But I think the reason I'm hesitating is I'm thinking, if you've got one with a triangle like this and the other on the other side, you'd have to kind of shape those 2 triangles together so that to get the whole formed an actual square, if you wanted a square. I'm kind of curious, Sharon, to see if you go about doing it. Could be really interesting. Marcy is saying your niece just had her first baby. It could be an idea. I totally could, because I love the idea of using a larger size yarn, because those cables would look good in a larger size yarn as well. And it's going to be much faster for doing it for a baby blanket. So definitely an excellent idea. Before I finish up, because I'm wearing my very cozy Iascaire sweater here, I thought I'd show you a couple of kits that have come in that Laura has been having a lot of fun putting things together. So the Iascaire uses one strand of our Bloss Delight, it's done in Donegal, and it's a fine woolen spun single ply. and it's paired with in this case, it's Capriccio. Or yeah, I think this one was Capriccio that we paired it with, which is a mohair blend, mohair and silk blend. But we've kind of coming up with different colors that you can pair these with. So this is a new one that we've got. This is Baracca's, the original one. We've got a haze lace in what is Sapira color, which has a brand new combo, which actually works really, really well. I think Camilla has nabbed some of this, but we are getting some more in shortly, which makes a lovely good combo. And the other one was there's a new color of our Blosta Light here, and we've been finding different combos of yarns that will go with it. So we've got the original Capriccio in Sea Salt. So this is the original one, which works really nicely in Capriccio. This is a new Kremke Silky Kid, which also is a really nice match. And here's the haze lace in Rain, which is really pretty. So I've got all of these sitting tempting me when I've got to finish off some other projects, but they're sitting there to enjoy over in the corner. Irina, you've got a quick question about torque. You're about to do the sleeves and you've never done a sleeve cap before. How long is it supposed to be? Your row gauge is tighter, so you're wondering if there's a visual cue. So when you're doing, I would actually try it on is the answer. So when you're actually sitting and you're wearing it and when you finished it, you want the sleeve cap to be pretty close to horizontal here. So if you take a look at, the torque photographs where it's a short sleeve one where we've just got a shorter one, you can see how it curves around the top. So because you've picked it up, you work short rows and they're coming down here and forming a cap. You want it to come fairly close to horizontal here. It won't be quite down, it'll be a little higher. And then, because at that point, you're just going to be working the sleeve down. So that's what the sleeve cap is doing. It's filling in the top corner of it. So if your row gauge is tight, and you feel that you need more rows, what you can actually do is you can start working just a couple of extra rows into the actual sleeve cap, or with this one, with the torque, you can't normally, I'd say you can start with a narrower top because it's a saddle shoulder, you can't go any narrower. So what you might end up doing is doing a few more stitches down further, or possibly kind of going back and adding a couple more short rows if you feel it's a little short. But ultimately it won't really be the end of the world if it's a tiny bit shorter. It just might mean that the top pulls up a little bit more, but even adding a little bit of extra length to the full sleeve is going to help counteract that as well. So it's not terribly critical, but that's kind of what you're trying to achieve with those short rows for the sleeve cap, is creating that nice curve across the top, basically. Camilla, yes, that's the combos on its way to you. Can yeah, that you actually inspired us, Camilla, to actually pull these out, because we're like, maybe we should share these with other people because they're so pretty. Laura was very happy packing those up. Um, Laurie, could I say again regarding the lace, of the two stitches you're knitting into, the yarn over first and the yarn over is the second stitch? Yes, that's exactly right. So as you go into put the needle in, the first one you're putting into is the knit two together and then the yarn over. But yes, then when you look at on the needle, the first one you see is yarn over and the next one is the knit two together. Because if it's the other way around, when you're going to go and try and knit them together, it will feel a little bit strange because it's harder to put it in that way. But that's the next stitches, yarn over, knit two together. And as you start getting into rhythm and feeling what it's like, you'll very quickly start kind of getting a sense for if something feels a little bit different as you're going along. Marcy, you love the fit of your torque, even though it shrank a bit. Oh, maybe block it and stretch it out, or add a little bit to the length to help with it a small bit. I don't think I've missed any other questions along the way. Melvia, the last combo is beautiful. It is, isn't it? I'll just put it up once more again. Yeah, it's the rain and the lock color of the two together. It is a very, very, because these ones are very subtle color variations, which means that I think it really adds a lot of interest to the solid color when it's being worked with it. Irina, so adding more short rows would be okay. Yeah, absolutely. And adding short rows is going to be the most straightforward way of doing that, I think. If you've got enough stitches to add more short rows, just go for it. But try it on. Use your judgment as you try it on if you think you'd like the sleeve cap to be a bit further down. So the benefit of top down is you can try and you can check and you can see if you like the way it is effectively. So I think I've answered everyone's questions, and this is going to be it for a couple of weeks. I'll be back on the 18th, where I'll be talking all things cables. I'll reveal the final shawl. I'll share with you the winner of our grand prize raffle. And I've got a few other cable patterns that are new that I want to share with you. So thank you all for joining me, and have a great end of week and weekend, everyone. Bye. Oh, Hannah has just popped up. I am a liar. It's March 20th, not March 18th. 18th is the raffle, 20th is the live, when I will share who won and I will share the final one. So Hannah is a godsend, because apparently I have a brain like a sieve for numbers today. It'd be dangerous if I had a brain. All right. Thank you, everyone.